The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the downtown Starbucks, casting golden streaks across the polished marble floors. It was 7:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, and the coffee shop buzzed with the usual symphony of grinding espresso machines, steaming milk, and the gentle murmur of morning conversations. Chen stood in line, her worn canvas backpack slung over one shoulder, clutching a crumpled $5 bill, the last of her weekly allowance. She'd been in the city for exactly 3 days now, having transferred from a small community college in Oregon to attend Metropolitan University on a partial scholarship. Everything about this place felt foreign to her. The towering skyscrapers that seemed to scrape the very clouds, the designer clothing that everyone seemed to wear so casually, and especially the prices. Back home, coffee was something you made in a $20 machine from the thrift store. Here, even the smallest latte cost more than her entire lunch budget. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Maya had chosen this particular Starbucks because it was the closest one to campus, and she'd hoped it might be slightly less intimidating than the ones in the financial district. She was wrong. Even at this early hour, the place was filled with people in sharp suits, designer handbags, and shoes that probably cost more than her monthly rent. She tugged at her faded jeans and oversized sweater, suddenly very aware of how out of place she looked. The line moved slowly, giving Maya time to study the menu board with growing anxiety. Back in Oregon, she'd been to Starbucks maybe 3 times in her entire life, usually for special occasions like birthdays or graduation. Here, it seemed like a daily ritual for everyone around her. She listened carefully to the orders ahead of her, trying to decipher the complex language of venti soy chai latte with an extra shot and oat milk foam, and grande americano with 2 pumps vanilla and light cream. When it was finally her turn, Maya stepped up to the counter, where a friendly barista with purple hair smiled at her. "Good morning. What could I get started for you today?" Maya's voice came out smaller than she'd intended. Could I just get a tall, regular coffee? Just black coffee." The barista's expression softened slightly, as if she recognized something in Maya's hesitant tone. "Of course. That'll be $2.45. As Maya fumbled with her crumpled bill, counting out the exact change, including quarters and dimes, she became acutely aware of the person behind her in line. She could feel their impatience radiating like heat, could hear the subtle sighs and the tap of expensive shoes against the marble floor. Her hands shook slightly as she tried to organize the coins, accidentally dropping a quarter that rolled toward the pickup area. "Are you seriously going to make everyone wait while you count out pennies?" The voice behind her was sharp, entitled, and unmistakably male. "Some of us have actual important places to be." Maya's cheeks burned as she bent to retrieve the quarter. I'm sorry, I just need one more second. Look, if you can't afford a decent cup of coffee, maybe you shouldn't be holding up the line at Starbucks. There's a McDonald's down the street where they take food stamps." Maya straightened up, the quarter clutched in her palm, her face now completely flushed. She turned slightly to see her tormentor for the first time. He was probably around her age, maybe a year or 2 older, with the kind of perfectly styled blonde hair that screamed expensive salon visits. He wore a navy blue blazer over dark jeans, and his wrist sported a watch that probably cost more than Maya's entire college tuition. Everything about him radiated privilege and entitlement, from his perfectly straight white teeth to his leather loafers that probably came from some boutique in Soho. "I'm not using food stamps," Maya said quietly, her voice trembling with a mixture of embarrassment and growing anger. "I'm just paying with change." The blonde boy, who looked like he'd never worked a day in his life, let out a theatrical sigh and turned to address the crowd behind him as if Maya weren't even there. "Can you believe this? I'm going to be late for my economics class at Columbia because some scholarship kid can't figure out how money works." The barista behind the counter cleared her throat. "Sir, there's no need to, don't sir me," the boy snapped, his attention turning back to Maya. "And you?" He jabbed a finger in her direction, his voice rising. "You need to learn that there are places for people like you, and this isn't one of them." Maya felt something crack inside her chest. She'd dealt with condescending remarks before, had faced down bullies in high school, had weathered the skeptical looks when she told people about her college acceptance. But there was something particularly cruel about this moment. The public humiliation, the casual cruelty, the way he dismissed her worth as a human being over pocket change for coffee. "People like me?" Maya's voice was quiet, but there was steel underneath it now. "What exactly do you mean by that?" The boy stepped closer, invading her personal space with the casual arrogance of someone who'd never faced real consequences. "I mean, people who clearly don't belong in places like this. People who should know their place." The entire Starbucks had gone quiet now, conversations dying as customers turned to watch the confrontation unfold. Maya could feel dozens of eyes on her, could sense smartphones being discreetly pulled out to record what was clearly about to become a scene. The silence in the Starbucks was deafening. Maya could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears as she stared at the entitled young man in front of her. His perfectly styled hair, expensive clothes, and cruel smirk made her stomach turn. But it was the casual way he dismissed her humanity that truly ignited the fire building inside her chest. "My place?" Maya repeated, her voice gaining strength. "And where exactly do you think my place is?" The blonde boy, she could see a designer wallet peeking out of his blazer pocket with what looked like a black American Express card, rolled his eyes dramatically. "Look, I don't have time for this sob story. Some of us have real lives to get to. Daddy's trust fund doesn't manage itself, you know." He laughed at his own joke, a sound that reminded Maya of nails on a chalkboard. "Actually," Maya said, taking a step forward, "it sounds like Daddy's trust fund manages everything for you, including your personality, apparently." A few customers near the pickup counter let out quiet oohs, and Maya caught the barista trying to hide a smile. The boy's face flushed red, his composure cracking for the first time. "Excuse me? Do you have any idea who I am?" His voice pitched higher, the entitled whine becoming more pronounced. "I'm Bradley Thornton III. My family owns half the real estate in Manhattan. My father sits on the board of what? The International Association of Disappointed Parents?" Maya interrupted, surprising herself with her boldness. Back in Oregon, she would have never spoken to someone this way. But something about this moment, this place, this complete stranger's cruelty had awakened something fierce inside her. Bradley's face went from red to purple. "You little—" He stepped even closer, close enough that Maya could smell his expensive cologne mixed with something that might have been alcohol from the night before. "Do you know what I can do to you? One phone call from my father and you'll be kicked out of whatever community college you crawled out of. One word from me and you'll never work anywhere in this city." Maya felt her hands tremble, but not from fear this time, from rage. "Are you threatening me? Over coffee change? What kind of person are you?" "The kind of person who doesn't have to put up with trash like you. The kind of person who can make your pathetic little life disappear with a snap of my fingers." The barista finally stepped forward. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice or leave the store. You're disrupting other customers." Bradley whirled around to face her, his movement so sudden and aggressive that Maya instinctively took a step back. "Don't tell me what to do. I spend more money in this chain in a week than you make in a month. I want to speak to your manager right now." "I am the manager," the barista replied calmly, though Maya could see her hand moving toward what was probably a panic button behind the counter. "And I'm asking you to leave." You're asking me to leave? Me? Do you know who my family is? Do you know how much power we have in this city?" Maya watched this display of pure, unfiltered entitlement with growing disgust. She'd encountered rich kids before. Her scholarship program had orientation sessions with students from all backgrounds, but she'd never seen someone so completely detached from reality, so utterly convinced that money made them superior to other human beings. "Your family's money doesn't give you the right to treat people like garbage," Maya said, her voice carrying across the now silent coffee shop. "It doesn't make you better than anyone else here." Bradley turned back to her, his eyes narrow and filled with a kind of cold fury that Maya's blood ran cold. "Listen very carefully, you little nobody. You have no idea what you're messing with. You have no idea what I'm capable of." "What are you capable of?" challenged Maya, though every instinct screamed at her to just walk away. "Making threats in a coffee shop? Throwing temper tantrums when people don't bow down to your daddy's money?" Bradley's face contorted with rage. "You want to see what I'm capable of?" The next few seconds seemed to unfold in slow motion. Maya saw Bradley's hand rise, saw the cruel satisfaction in his eyes, saw the shocked faces of the customers around them. She heard the barista shout, "No!" and saw phone cameras turning in their direction. And then, Bradley Thornton III, heir to a Manhattan real estate fortune, son of one of the city's most prominent families, slapped Maya Chen across the face in a crowded Starbucks. The sound echoed through the coffee shop like a gunshot. Maya's head snapped to the side, her cheek burning with pain and shock. For a moment, the world went completely silent, except for the ringing in her ears. When she turned back to face Bradley, her hand pressed against her stinging cheek, she saw something in his eyes that hadn't been there before: fear. As if the physical contact had suddenly made him realize that this wasn't just words anymore, that he'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. "Oh my God," someone whispered from across the room. "Did he just—" another voice began. "Someone call the police." Maya stared at Bradley, who suddenly looked less like an intimidating rich boy and more like a scared child who had just realized he'd done something terrible. His hand was still raised slightly, as if he couldn't quite believe what he'd just done either. "You—" Maya's voice came out as barely a whisper, her cheek throbbing with pain. "You actually hit me." The aftermath of the slap seemed to stretch into eternity. Maya's cheek burned with a pain that went far beyond the physical. It was the sting of humiliation, of being reduced to less than human in front of a room full of strangers. She could feel every eye in the Starbucks focused on her, could hear the subtle sounds of phone cameras recording, could sense the collective held breath of dozens of witnesses. Bradley Thornton III stood frozen, his hand still partially raised, staring at Maya with what looked like genuine shock at his own actions. For a moment, the entitled mask had slipped completely, revealing something that might have been panic underneath. I didn't mean to," he stammered, then seemed to catch himself. The arrogant expression slid back into place, but it looked forced now, like a costume that no longer fit properly. "You pushed me to that. You provoked me with your attitude." Maya touched her cheek gingerly, feeling the heat radiating from where his palm had connected. In the 3 days she'd been in New York, she'd imagined many scenarios for how her new life might begin. Being publicly assaulted by a trust fund baby in a coffee shop had not been one of them. "Sir, I'm calling the police right now," the barista announced loudly, her phone already in her hand. "What you just did is assault, and I have it all on our security cameras." "You're not calling anyone," Bradley snapped, some of his confidence returning as he reached into his blazer. "Do you know what this is?" He pulled out a business card, holding it up like a weapon. "That's my father's law firm. They have half the judges in this city on speed dial.
One call from me and you'll be looking for a new job by lunch." Maya watched this display with growing amazement. Even after physically attacking someone, even with dozens of witnesses and security cameras recording, Bradley Thornton III genuinely believed he was untouchable. The depth of his privilege, the completeness of his disconnect from consequences was almost breathtaking. "You think your daddy can make assault charges disappear?" Maya asked, her voice getting stronger despite the pain in her cheek. "You think money makes you above the law?" "Money makes me above you," Bradley replied, his cruel smile returning. "Money makes me above everyone in this pathetic little coffee shop. Money means I can do whatever I want to whoever I want, and people like you just have to take it." The crowd around them had grown larger, customers abandoning their tables to get a better view of the confrontation. Maya could see at least a dozen phones recording, could hear whispered conversations about posting the social media, about this going viral. In a different situation, the attention might have mortified her. Now she found herself hoping every second was being captured. "People like me," Maya repeated, her voice carrying a note that made several customers look up sharply. There was something different in her tone now, something that hadn't been there before. "You, keep saying that. People like me." "Yeah," Bradley said, mistaking her tone for defeat. "People without money, without connections, without power. People who don't matter." Maya smiled then, an expression that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You're absolutely right about one thing, Bradley. We are different kinds of people." Something in her voice made Bradley hesitate. The way she'd said his name, the subtle shift in her posture, the fact that she was smiling after being slapped, it all seemed wrong somehow. "The difference is," Maya continued, her voice carrying clearly across the silent coffee shop, "I know exactly who I am. I know what I've earned and what I deserve. I know the value of $1 and the cost of kindness. I know what it means to work for something." She took a step closer to Bradley, who instinctively backed up slightly. "But you," Maya's smile widened, "you have no idea who you are without Daddy's money. You have no identity beyond your trust fund. You're so empty, so pathetic, that you have to attack complete strangers to feel powerful." Bradley's face was turning red again. "Shut up! You don't know anything about me." "I know everything about you," Maya replied calmly. "You're every spoiled rich boy who's never been told no. You're every entitled brat who thinks the world owes them something. You're every coward who picks on people they think can't fight back." The crowd was murmuring now, phones still recording, but the mood in the room had shifted. Maya no longer looked like a victim. She looked like someone who had just found her voice. "The problem with people like you, Bradley," she said, her voice carrying an authority that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once, "is that you've never learned that actions have consequences. You've lived your entire life in a bubble where Daddy's money fixes everything, where you never have to face the results of your choices." Bradley was looking genuinely uncomfortable now, glancing around at the crowd of witnesses, at the phones recording his every word and expression. "Well, congratulations," Maya continued, her smile now sharp as broken glass. "Today's the day you learn." Before Bradley could respond, the front door of the Starbucks opened with such force that it slammed against the wall, causing several customers to jump. But it wasn't the police, as everyone had been expecting. Instead, 4 men in identical black suits walked in, moving with the kind of coordinated precision that spoke of professional training. They weren't large men. In fact, they looked almost unremarkable. But something about their presence immediately changed the energy in the room. Maya glanced toward the door and sighed softly. "Right on time," she murmured, though her voice carried clearly in the sudden silence. Bradley followed her gaze to the 4 men, confusion replacing the anger on his face. "Who are they? Are they with you?" Maya looked back at him, and for the first time since the confrontation began, she looked genuinely sorry. "Bradley," she said quietly, "I tried to warn you." The four men in black suits didn't announce themselves, didn't flash badges or make grand proclamations. They simply took positions around the Starbucks with the kind of quiet efficiency that spoke of years of professional training. Two positioned themselves near the main entrance, effectively blocking any exit, while the other two flanked the counter area, their eyes scanning the crowd with practiced assessment. Bradley looked between Maya and the newcomers, his confusion evident. What's going on here? Who are these guys? Before Maya could answer, the front door opened again, this time revealing a woman who immediately commanded attention despite her understated appearance. She looked to be in her 40s, with shoulder-length black hair streaked with silver, wearing a simple but clearly expensive gray pantsuit. She moved with the kind of confidence that came from being accustomed to being the most important person in any room. The woman's eyes found Maya immediately, scanning her from head to toe with the practiced efficiency of someone assessing for injury. When she noticed Maya's hand still pressed against her reddened cheek, her expression hardened in a way that made several nearby customers instinctively take a step back. "Maya," the woman said, her voice carrying easily across the silent coffee shop despite its moderate volume. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine, Mom," Maya replied, and Bradley's face went completely white. The word Mom seemed to echo in the sudden silence. Around them, customers began whispering to each other, phones still recording, trying to piece together what they were witnessing. Bradley stood frozen, his mouth slightly open, staring between Maya and the woman who had just entered with what appeared to be a private security detail. Maya's mother approached slowly, her heels clicking against the marble floor with measured precision. She didn't look at Bradley, didn't even acknowledge his existence, keeping her attention focused entirely on her daughter. "The security alert came through about 10 minutes ago. When someone strikes my daughter, I tend to find out about it rather quickly." "Security alert?" Bradley found his voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. Maya's mother finally turned to look at him, and Bradley immediately understood why she commanded such obvious respect from her security team. Her gaze was sharp, calculating, and utterly without warmth. "Mr. Thornton," she said, and Bradley's knees nearly buckled at the casual use of his name. "Bradley Thornton III, correct? Son of Bradley Thornton Jr., who runs Thornton Properties." "How do you—" Bradley began, but Maya's mother continued as if he hadn't spoken. "Graduated from Phillips Academy last year, currently a sophomore at Columbia, studying economics with a minor in business administration. Trust fund value approximately $12 million, with full access beginning at age 25. She spoke with the casual precision of someone reading from a file. Currently on academic probation for poor attendance and multiple conduct violations. The blood drained from Bradley's face. "Who are you?" Maya's mother smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. "I'm Catherine Chen, Bradley. I'm Maya's mother. I'm also the CEO and majority shareholder of Chen Global Industries." The name hit the coffee shop like a thunderbolt. Even customers who hadn't been paying attention to the confrontation turned to stare. Chen Global Industries was one of the largest multinational corporations in the world, with interests in everything from technology to real estate to defense contracting. Catherine Chen was regularly featured on Forbes lists, had been called one of the most powerful women in business, and was known for her ruthless approach to competition. Bradley's legs seemed to give out slightly, and he grabbed onto a nearby chair for support. "Oh God, I didn't know." "Didn't know what?" Catherine asked, her voice deceptively mild. "That attacking young women in public spaces might have consequences? That you didn't know that some people might have fathers, or in this case mothers, who don't appreciate seeing their children assaulted?" "I didn't it wasn't supposed to," Bradley stammered, sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. "You didn't mean to what, exactly?" Catherine stepped closer to Bradley, and despite being several inches shorter than him, she somehow seemed to tower over him. "You didn't mean to publicly humiliate my daughter. You didn't mean to physically assault her. You didn't mean to threaten her with your family's influence." Maya watched the interaction with fascination. She'd seen her mother in business mode before, had witnessed the controlled power that made Catherine Chen one of the most feared negotiators in corporate America, but she'd never seen it directed at someone who had hurt her personally. "Please," Bradley said, his voice cracking. "I'm sorry. I made a mistake. I was having a bad morning and I took it out on her. It won't happen again." "You're absolutely right about that. It won't happen again. The question is whether this was simply a momentary lapse in judgment from a young man who made a terrible mistake, or whether this is indicative of a pattern of behavior that needs to be addressed more permanently." One of the security team members approached Catherine and whispered something in her ear. She nodded slightly, then turned back to Bradley. "I'm told that you made several threats about your family's influence, about making my daughter's life difficult through your connections. I find that interesting, because according to my research, your family's business is currently negotiating several major deals that could be affected by outside influences." Bradley's face went from white to green. "You wouldn't what?" asked Catherine, her voice remaining calm, almost conversational. "Use my business connections to make things difficult for people who assault my daughter. You might be surprised what I would do when it comes to protecting my family." The entire Starbucks was dead silent now, the only sounds coming from the espresso machines behind the counter and the subtle electronic beeps from the phones still recording. Maya realized that dozens of people were witnessing what might become a legendary confrontation, the moment when an entitled rich boy learned that there was always someone richer, someone more powerful, someone more connected. "What do you want from me?" Bradley asked, his voice barely audible. Catherine studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "That's an interesting question, Mr. Thornton. What do I want from someone who struck my daughter in public, who threatened her with financial ruin, who treated her as less than human because he assumed she had no power or protection?" She paused, letting the question hang in the air. "What I want, Bradley, is to understand exactly what kind of person you are. Are you someone who made a terrible mistake and genuinely regrets it? Someone who can learn from this experience and become better? Or are you simply someone who's sorry because you got caught? Someone who will go right back to abusing people the moment you think you can get away with it?" Bradley stood in the center of the Starbucks, sweat now visible on his forehead despite the cool morning air. The weight of Catherine Chen's question hung over him like a sword, and Maya could see him struggling to find an answer that might save him from whatever consequences her mother was considering. "I made a mistake," Bradley said finally, his voice shaking. A terrible mistake. I was wrong to treat Maya that way. Wrong to hear her, wrong to make threats. I'm not usually like this." Catherine tilted her head slightly, studying him with the same intensity she might use to evaluate a potential business acquisition. "Not usually like this. Interesting. So what you're telling me is that assaulting young women in coffee shops is aberrant behavior for you?" "Yes," Bradley said quickly, then seemed to realize how that sounded. "I mean, I've never hit anyone before. I was having a really bad week, and I took it out on her, and that was completely wrong." "A bad week," Catherine repeated, her tone neutral. "What kind of bad week leads to physically attacking strangers, Mr. Thornton?" Bradley glanced around desperately, seeming to notice for the first time that every person in the coffee shop was watching him, that dozens of phones were still recording his every word. Maya almost felt sorry for him. almost. Then she remembered the sting of his palm against her cheek, the casual cruelty in his voice when he told her to know her place. My girlfriend broke up with me, and my father, he's been putting a lot of pressure on me about my grades, about my future. I failed 2 midterms last week, and he threatened to cut off my allowance if I don't bring my GPA up. So your response to academic and personal stress was to attack a complete stranger, a young woman who was simply trying to buy coffee. I didn't plan it. She was taking so long with her change, and I was already late for class, and then she started arguing with me. I started arguing with you. You're the one who started making comments about food stamps and telling me I didn't belong here. You talked back to me, Bradley said, turning to face her. You should have just apologized and moved on. Instead, you kept pushing and pushing until I snapped. The audacity of his words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Even some of the customers who had been filming looked shocked at his complete inability to take responsibility for his actions. Catherine's expression didn't change, but Maya noticed her hands clenched slightly at her sides. When she spoke, her voice was still calm, but there was steel underneath it now. Let me make sure I understand your position, Mr. Thornton. You believe that my daughter, after being publicly humiliated and threatened by you, should have simply apologized and accepted your abuse. I didn't mean that. I think that's exactly what you meant. You believe that people without your perceived social status should simply accept whatever treatment you decide to give them. You believe that having money gives you the right to treat others as less than human. Maya watched her mother with growing admiration. Catherine Chen hadn't raised her voice, hadn't made any dramatic gestures, but she was systematically dismantling Bradley's entire worldview with surgical precision. Your father is Bradley Thornton Jr., correct? He and I have actually met at several charity functions over the years. Decent man, from what I recall. I wonder what he would think if he knew his son was assaulting young women in public. Bradley's face went white again. You wouldn't tell him. Please, you can't tell him. He already thinks I'm a disappointment. If he finds out about this what? He might actually hold you accountable for your actions. He might realize that his son has grown up to be the kind of person who attacks strangers. Catherine's voice remained level, but Maya could hear the disgust underneath it. One of the security team members approached Catherine again, this time handing her what looked like a tablet. She glanced at it briefly, then looked back at Bradley. "This is interesting," she said. "My team has been doing some research while we've been talking. It seems this isn't actually your first incident of aggressive behavior, is it, Bradley?" Bradley's knees seemed to give out slightly, and he grabbed onto a chair for support. "What do you mean?" "Phillips Academic, spring of your senior year. An incident with a younger student that resulted in a disciplinary hearing and a sealed settlement. Columbia University, 3 separate complaints filed against you for harassment, though charges were dropped each time after intervention from your family's lawyers." Maya stared at Bradley in horror. The picture Catherine was painting wasn't of someone who had simply had a bad morning. It was of someone with a pattern of using his privilege to abuse others. "Those were misunderstandings," Bradley desperately said. "The complaints were dropped because they were false. My family's lawyers proved that." "Your family's lawyers made them go away," Catherine corrected. "There's a significant difference. Money has a way of making inconvenient truths disappear, doesn't it?" The coffee shop was so quiet that Maya could hear individual conversations from the street outside. Every person present seemed to understand that they were witnessing something unprecedented. The complete and total exposure of someone who had spent his entire life believing he was untouchable. "What do you want from me?" Bradley asked again, his voice breaking. "I said I was sorry. I admitted I was wrong. What else can I do?" Catherine looked at him for a long moment, then glanced at Maya. "That's actually up to my daughter," she said. "Maya, what do you think should happen to someone who assaulted you in public?" Maya felt every eye in the Starbucks turn to her. For a moment, she was overwhelmed by the weight of the decision, by the realization that whatever she said next would determine Bradley's fate.
Maya stared at Bradley Thornton III, taking in his expensive clothes, his perfectly styled hair, and his now terrified expression. 20 minutes ago, he had been the embodiment of entitled privilege, treating her like something he'd scraped off his shoe. Now, he stood before her, sweating and shaking, waiting for her to decide his fate. The power dynamic had shifted so completely that Maya almost felt dizzy from it. She thought about all the times in her life when she'd been powerless, when kids at school had made fun of her secondhand clothes, when college counselors had suggested she might want to be realistic about her academic goals, when professors had questioned whether she really belonged in advanced classes. She thought about every moment when someone with more money, more connections, more perceived status had made her feel small. And now, one of those people was at her mercy. "You want to know what I think should happen to you?" Maya asked, her voice carrying clearly across the silent coffee shop. Bradley nodded frantically. "Yes, please. I'll do whatever you think is fair." Maya looked around the room, taking in the faces of dozens of strangers who had witnessed her humiliation and Bradley's assault. She saw the barista who had tried to defend her, the customers who had recorded everything on their phones, the security team standing ready to act on her mother's orders. "I think," Maya said slowly, "that you should experience what it feels like to have your life completely disrupted by someone else's whims." Bradley's face went white. "What does that mean?" "It means," Catherine interjected smoothly, "that there are a number of options available to us. We could file criminal charges for assault. Public assault with multiple witnesses and video evidence tends to be fairly straightforward in court. We could file civil charges for emotional distress and public humiliation. We could contact Columbia University about their student conduct policies regarding off-campus criminal behavior." With each option Catherine listed, Bradley seemed to shrink further into himself. Maya could see him calculating the cost of each consequence, the criminal record, the lawsuit, the academic expulsion from Columbia. "Or," Catherine continued, "we could contact your father directly. I imagine Bradley Jr. would be very interested to learn about his son's behavior, especially given that Thornton Properties is currently bidding on several major contracts with companies in my business network." Please don't tell my father. He'll cut me off completely. I'll lose everything." "Everything?" Maya asked, and there was genuine curiosity in her voice. "What exactly would you lose, Bradley? Your trust fund? Your guaranteed job at Daddy's company? Your safety net that lets you treat people however you want without consequences?" Bradley stared at her, seeming to finally understand what she was getting at. "Maybe losing those things would be the best thing that ever happened to you," Maya continued. "Maybe you need to learn what it's like to live in the world the rest of us inhabit, the world where actions have consequences, where you can't just buy your way out of problems, where you have to treat people with basic human decency because it's the right thing to do, not because you're afraid of their connections." Bradley's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "But I need those things. I don't know how to live without them." "Then maybe it's time you learned," Maya said firmly. "But here's what's going to happen, Bradley. You're going to have a choice." She looked at her mother, who nodded slightly, understanding passing between them. "Option 1, Maya said, we pursue every possible legal avenue. Criminal charges, civil suit, academic disciplinary action, and yes, we tell your father everything. You face the full consequences of your actions, and you learn what it's like when money can't protect you from reality." Bradley's breathing became rapid and shallow. "And option 2. Maya smiled, but it wasn't a kind expression. "Option 2 is much more interesting. You get to keep your trust fund, your college enrollment, and your father's ignorance. But in exchange, you're going to learn what it means to be powerless. I don't understand, though from his expression, Maya could tell he was afraid to understand. You're going to work, Maya said simply. Real work. Minimum wage work. 40 hours a week for 6 months at a job where no one knows your last name and no one cares about your daddy's money. Catherine stepped forward. One of my companies owns a chain of coffee shops, cleaning services, and retail stores throughout the city. Mr. Thornton would be assigned to whichever location needs the most help with the most unpleasant tasks. But I have classes, Bradley protested weakly. Then you'll work nights and weekends, Maya replied. The same schedule thousands of students work to pay their way through college. The difference is every penny you earned will go to charity. You don't get to keep a dime. Bradley stared at her in horror. 6 months of minimum wage work? Do you know what that would do to my social life, my reputation? Maya's smile widened. Now you're starting to understand what this is about. For 6 months, you get to experience what it's like to be invisible, to be looked down on, to have people treat you like you don't matter. You get to understand what you put me through, except you'll be experiencing it for months instead of minutes. And if I refuse? Bradley asked, though his voice suggested he already knew the answer. Then we go with option 1. Catherine said cheerfully. Criminal charges, civil suit, academic disciplinary action, and yes, we tell your father everything. Bradley looked around the coffee shop desperately, as if hoping someone might step forward to rescue him from the consequences of his own actions. But the customers were still filming, still watching his humiliation with fascination. No one was coming to save Bradley Thornton III from the consequences of his own actions. There's more, Maya continued, enjoying the power she held over someone who tried to make her feel powerless. During those 6 months, you're going to write a journal. Every day, you're going to write about what you learned, how people treated you, and what it felt like to be dismissed and ignored. And at the end of 6 months, you're going to publish that journal online with a full apology to me and to everyone else you've ever treated badly. A public journal? Bradley's voice cracked. You want me to publicly humiliate myself for 6 months? I want you to publicly document your education, Maya corrected. Your education in basic human empathy and decency. Consider it community service. Bradley stood in silence for nearly a full minute, the weight of his decision pressing down on him like a physical force. Maya watched him calculate the cost, the humiliation of manual labor, the destruction of his social status, the risk of his friends discovering his situation. Finally, he looked up at Maya with defeated eyes, and Maya saw something that might have been the beginning of understanding. Okay, I'll do it. I'll take option 2. Maya felt a surge of satisfaction that went beyond simple revenge. For the first time in her life, she had turned the tables on someone who tried to use their privilege as a weapon against her. But more than that, she might actually be giving Bradley a chance to become a better person. Good choice, she said. You start Monday. The Starbucks erupted in whispered conversations as Bradley's acceptance of Maya's terms sank in. Customers who had been recording the confrontation were already uploading videos to social media, and Maya could see the notifications lighting up phones throughout the coffee shop. This was going to be all over the internet within hours. One of Catherine's security team members approached and handed her a folder. She glanced through it quickly, then looked back at Bradley with an expression that might have been pity. Mr. Thornton, Catherine said, before we finalize this arrangement, I think it's important that you understand exactly what you're agreeing to. This isn't going to be some token job where you show up and get paid for existing. You'll be working real jobs with real expectations. Bradley nodded slowly, still looking shell-shocked by the turn of events. "I understand." "Do you?" Maya asked. "Because I don't think you really comprehend what minimum wage work actually entails. When was the last time you cleaned a toilet, Bradley? When was the last time you had to smile and be polite to someone who was treating you like garbage because you needed the job?" Bradley's silence was answer enough. Catherine opened the folder and began reading. "Your first assignment will be at Java Junction on the Lower East Side. It's one of our busiest locations, serving primarily working-class customers and students from the local community college. You'll be starting as a general assistant, cleaning bathrooms, mopping floors, taking out trash, washing dishes." "Washing dishes?" Bradley repeated weakly. "Washing dishes," Catherine confirmed. 8-hour shifts, Tuesday through Saturday. Your supervisor will be Maria Santos, a single mother of 3 who's been with the company for 7 years. She worked her way up from exactly the position you'll be starting in. Maya watched Bradley's face as the reality of his situation began to sink in. She could see him trying to imagine himself in a hairnet and rubber gloves, scrubbing dishes in a cramped kitchen, while his Columbia classmates were at fraternity parties and networking events. The uniform will be provided, but you'll be responsible for keeping it clean and pressed. You'll also need to purchase non-slip work shoes and ensure your appearance meets our company standards at all times. "Company standards?" Bradley asked. "Professional appearance, positive attitude, punctuality, and respect for all customers and coworkers. The same standards we apply to every employee, regardless of their background or circumstances." Maya felt a warm satisfaction as she watched Bradley grapple with concepts that had never applied to him before. Punctuality when your trust fund didn't depend on showing up. Professional appearance when you couldn't just buy your way out of consequences. Respect for people regardless of their social status. "What about Columbia?" Bradley asked. "I have classes, commitments." "You'll work around your class schedule," Maya said firmly, "just like thousands of other students do every day. You'll learn to manage your time, prioritize your responsibilities, and make sacrifices. Welcome to the real world." Catherine handed Bradley a business card. "Report to this address Monday morning at 6 a.m. sharp. You'll meet with Maria for orientation and training. I suggest you get a good night's sleep beforehand. Restaurant work is physically demanding." 6 a.m.? Bradley looked horrified. "But I don't usually get up before noon," Maya finished. "Yeah, I figured. That's going to change. Working people don't have the luxury of sleeping until they feel like getting up." The barista, who had witnessed the entire confrontation, approached cautiously. "Excuse me," she said to Maya. "I just wanted to say that what just happened was incredible. I've been working in customer service for 5 years, and I've dealt with entitled customers like him dozens of times. I've never seen anyone actually face real consequences before." Maya smiled at her. "What's your name?" "Jessica," the barista replied. "Jessica Martinez." "Jessica, thank you for standing up for me earlier. That took courage." Jessica shrugged. "It's part of the job, protecting customers from harassment, though usually the harassers just storm out when we threaten to call the police. I've never seen anything like what just happened." Bradley had been listening to this exchange with growing discomfort. Maya could see him realizing that Jessica, someone he probably never noticed before, someone whose existence was invisible to him, had been his victim's defender. Someone who worked for minimum wage had shown more character and courage than he had, with all his trust fund and family connections.
Bradley, Maya said, turning back to him, I want you to apologize to Jessica. You disrupted her workplace, created a hostile environment for her customers, and forced her to deal with your tantrum. Bradley looked at Jessica as if seeing her for the first time, which Maya suspected was probably accurate. I am sorry, he said awkwardly. I shouldn't have acted that way in your store. Jessica studied him for a moment, then nodded. Apology accepted. But more importantly, I hope you learned something from this experience. There are a lot of people working jobs like mine who deserve respect and basic human decency. Maya watched this interaction with interest. Jessica hadn't been cruel or vindictive. She'd been professional and dignified, exactly the kind of person Bradley probably overlooked his entire life. Maya hoped that 6 months of working alongside people like Jessica would teach him to see the humanity in everyone, regardless of their job title or bank account. Catherine checked her watch, a gesture that somehow managed to convey that she had more important things to do than babysit a spoiled rich boy through the consequences of his actions. Mr. Thornton, you'll receive a complete employment packet via email this afternoon, including work schedules, company policies, and the contact information for your supervisor. I suggest you read everything carefully. What about the journal? Bradley asked, seeming to remember that aspect of his agreement. How does that work? Maya pulled out her phone and opened a notes app. You'll create a public blog. Every day after work, you'll write about your experiences, what you learned, how people treated you, what challenged you, what surprised you. Minimum 500 words per entry. Public blog? Bradley's voice cracked slightly. Anyone can read it? Anyone and everyone, Maya confirmed. The whole point is accountability. If you're just writing for yourself, you might be tempted to lie or sugarcoat things. Knowing that your friends, classmates, and family might read it will keep you honest. Bradley nodded slowly, the full weight of his situation finally becoming clear. He would spend the next 6 months working minimum wage jobs, writing publicly about his experiences, and learning what life was like for people without trust funds and family connections. Is there anything else? Bradley asked quietly. Maya looked at her mother, who shook her head slightly. Just one more thing, Maya said. At the end of 6 months, if you fulfilled all your obligations, we'll consider this matter closed. But if you ever, and I mean ever, treat another person the way you treated me today, if you use your privilege to hurt or humiliate someone again, all bets are off. We'll have documentation of this entire incident and we won't hesitate to use it. Bradley nodded again, then looked directly at Maya for the first time since her mother had arrived. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I really am sorry. Not just because I got caught, but because I hurt you. You didn't deserve that. Maya studied his face, looking for signs of sincerity. She saw fear, certainly, and humiliation, but underneath it, she thought she might also see the beginning of genuine remorse. We'll see, she said simply.
3 weeks later, Maya sat in her dorm room at Metropolitan University, scrolling through Bradley's blog entries on her laptop. The transformation documented in his daily posts was both fascinating and satisfying to read. Day 1 had been exactly what she'd expected, a litany of complaints about the early wake-up time, the physical demands of the work, and the unreasonable expectations of his supervisor, Maria. Bradley had written extensively about his sore feet, his aching back, and his shock at how exhausting 8 hours of restaurant work could be. "I don't understand how people do this every day," he'd written. "By the time I got home, I was too tired to even think about homework. I just collapsed on my bed and slept for 12 hours straight." Day 5 had shown the first cracks in his privilege-armored worldview. Bradley had written about a customer who'd screamed at him for 10 minutes over an incorrectly prepared order, calling him stupid and worthless while he stood there, forced to smile and apologize. "I wanted to tell him who I really was," Bradley had written. "I wanted to explain that I'm a Columbia student, that my family has money, that I don't belong in this kind of job. But then I realized that's exactly the kind of thinking that got me into this mess. The idea that some people belong in service jobs and others don't. The idea that someone's worth is determined by their job title or bank account." Maya had smiled when she read that entry. It was the first sign that Bradley might actually be learning something. Day 12 had been a breakthrough. Bradley had written about Maria, his supervisor, with something approaching awe. "Maria Santos is probably the most competent person I've ever met," he'd written. "She manages a staff of 15 people, handles customer complaints with patience I didn't know existed, keeps track of inventory, schedules, and health department regulations, all while maintaining the kind of positive attitude that I used to think was fake. And she does all of this for $18 an hour. Today, she helped me when I was struggling with the industrial dishwasher, and she didn't make me feel stupid about not knowing how to use it. She just showed me the proper technique and told me that everyone starts somewhere. Later, I heard her on the phone during her break, talking to her daughter's teacher about a homework assignment. She's working 8 hours a day and still finding time to be an engaged parent. I keep thinking about how I would have treated Maria 3 weeks ago. I probably wouldn't have even noticed her. If I had, I might have looked down on her for working in food service. Now I'm wondering if she might be more successful than I'll ever be, just in ways that don't show up on a bank statement." Maya had felt a surge of unexpected pride when she read that entry. Bradley was beginning to understand something that had taken her years to learn, that worth and success came in many forms, most of which had nothing to do with inherited wealth. Day 18 had been difficult to read, even for Maya. Bradley had written about a customer who'd recognized him from social media coverage of the Starbucks incident. "A guy about my age came in today and immediately started recording me with his phone. He kept making loud comments about entitled rich boys and asking me how it felt to be the help. Other customers started staring, and I could feel my face burning with embarrassment. But then something unexpected happened. Maria stepped in and asked the guy to stop filming or leave the restaurant. She didn't do it for me. She did it because she maintains professional standards and won't tolerate customers harassing her employees regardless of who they are or why they're working there. Afterward, she pulled me aside and told me that everyone deserves dignity at work, and that whatever I'd done to end up in this situation, she was my employee now, and she'd protect me the same way she'd protect anyone else on her team." I almost cried, not from the humiliation of being recognized, but from the realization that Maria, someone I would have dismissed as just a supervisor a month ago, was showing me more leadership and character than I'd ever displayed in my entire life. Maya had to admit she felt a twinge of sympathy for Bradley in that moment. Public humiliation was never easy, even when it was deserved. Day 21, just yesterday, had been the most revealing entry yet. Bradley had written about his changing perspective on his Columbia classmates and the world he'd grown up in. "I had lunch on campus today between my morning classes and my evening shift. I sat in the dining hall listening to my former friends complain about their workloads, their parents' expectations, their stressful lives. One guy was upset because his father had only given him $500 for the week instead of the usual $800. Another was complaining about having to take an internship that only paid $25 an hour. 6 weeks ago, I would have joined right in with those complaints. Now I just sat there thinking about Maria's 3 kids, about Jessica, the barista, who works 2 jobs to pay for nursing school, about my coworker Diego, who sends half his paycheck to his family in El Salvador. I realized that my friends and I live in a bubble so complete, so insulated from reality, that we've lost all perspective on what actually constitutes a problem. We've been given every advantage in life, and we spend our time complaining that it isn't enough." Maya closed the laptop and leaned back in her desk chair, processing what she'd read. When she designed Bradley's punishment, she'd hoped it would teach him empathy and humility. She hadn't expected it to also give her insight into her own journey. Reading about Bradley's gradual awakening to the realities of working life reminded Maya of her own transition from small-town Oregon to the intimidating world of Manhattan privilege. The difference was that Bradley's education was happening by choice, consequence of his actions, while hers had been born of necessity. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Dinner tonight? I want to hear how school is going." Maya smiled. 3 weeks ago, she was a scared scholarship student counting change for coffee. Now she was someone who stood up to a bully and won. Someone whose story was inspiring thousands of people online. Someone who'd proven that power came in many forms, most of which had nothing to do with inherited wealth. She texted back, "Absolutely. And Mom, thank you for having my back." The response came quickly. "Always, sweetheart. Always." Maya was walking across campus 6 weeks later when she spotted a familiar figure hunched over a textbook at one of the outdoor study tables. Bradley Thornton III looked nothing like the arrogant rich boy who had slapped her in Starbucks 2 months ago. His perfectly styled hair was now practical and slightly unkempt, his designer clothes replaced with simple jeans and a Java Junction work polo. Dark circles under his eyes suggested he'd been pulling long days between classes and work shifts. For a moment, Maya considered walking past without acknowledging him. They'd had no contact since that day in the coffee shop, and she'd been following his transformation solely through his blog entries. But something about his posture, the exhausted slump of someone juggling more responsibilities than he'd ever imagined, made her pause. "Bradley," she said, approaching his table. He looked up, startled, and she could see a flash of fear cross his face before he composed himself. "Maya, hi. Mind if I sit?" she asked, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. Bradley nodded, closing his textbook and giving him her full attention. Maya noticed that his hands, once soft and manicured, now showed the calluses and small cuts that came from kitchen work. "How are you holding up?" Maya asked. Bradley let out a tired laugh. "Honestly, I'm exhausted. I had no idea how hard it would be to balance everything. Work, school, the blog. I'm getting maybe 5 hours of sleep a night." "Welcome to the life of a working student," Maya said, not unkindly. "Most of us learn to function on caffeine and determination." "I'm starting to understand that," Bradley replied. "I read your interview in the Columbia Daily Spectator, the one about scholarship students and financial stress. I had no idea what you were dealing with when we met that day." Maya was surprised he'd sought out her interview. "What did you think about it?" Bradley was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "I think I finally understood why you fought back that day. It wasn't just about the coffee or my rudeness. You'd probably been dealing with people like me your entire academic career, people who assumed you didn't belong, who made you prove your worth over and over again." Maya studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or performance. But Bradley's exhaustion seemed genuine, and there was something different in his eyes, a humility that hadn't been there before. "Your blog entries have been enlightening," Maya said. "Particularly the one about Maria's leadership style." Bradley's face lit up slightly. "She's incredible. Did you know she's taking business classes at night? She wants to open her own restaurant someday. She's been saving every penny for 5 years, working toward a dream while supporting 3 kids and helping her elderly mother. And before this experience, you never would have known any of that about her," Maya observed. "Before this experience, I never would have seen her as a person," Bradley admitted. "She would have been invisible to me, just another service worker whose name I didn't need to know." Maya felt a complicated mix of satisfaction and sympathy. The punishment was working. Bradley was genuinely learning and growing, but she could also see how difficult the process was for him.
The customer recognition thing, Maya said, referring to an incident Bradley had written about in his blog. How often does that happen? Bradley grimaced. More than I'd like. The Starbucks video went viral, so some people recognize me. Most just stare and whisper, but a few have been vocal about their opinions. Has it made you want to quit? Every day for the first month, Bradley admitted. But Maria told me something that stuck with me. She said that shame can either destroy you or educate you, and the choice is entirely yours. Maya was impressed despite herself. That's very wise. She's full of wisdom like that. Yesterday she told me that dignity isn't something people can take from you. It's something you choose to maintain or choose to surrender. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching other students hurry between classes. Maya found herself seeing the campus differently now, noticing which students looked stressed about money, which ones carried themselves with the casual confidence of unlimited resources. "Can I ask you something?" Bradley said quietly. Maya nodded. "Do you think I'm actually changing, or am I just learning to perform change because I have to?" The question surprised Maya with self-awareness. "What do you think?" Bradley considered this seriously. "I think both might be true. I think I started out just trying to survive the punishment, but somewhere along the way, the performance became real. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," Maya replied. "Sometimes we have to act our way into new thinking rather than think our way into new acting." "Where did you learn that?" Maya smiled. "My mother. Catherine Chen didn't build a business empire by waiting for motivation to strike. She built it by making good choices consistently until those choices became habits." "Your mother is terrifying," Bradley said, then immediately looked embarrassed. "I mean, in the best possible way. Terrifyingly competent." Maya laughed. She'd take that as a compliment. "How much longer do I have?" Bradley asked, though Maya suspected he already knew the answer. 10 weeks. "But Bradley," Maya paused, choosing her words carefully. "This doesn't end when your 6 months are up. The person you become during this experience, that's who you'll be going forward. The question is whether you'll choose to stay that person when no one's forcing you to." Bradley nodded slowly. "I've been thinking about that. About what happens when I go back to my regular life, my regular friends, my regular privileges. And I'm not sure I want to go back. Not completely. I don't want to become that person again, the person who could hit someone over coffee change." I felt an unexpected surge of hope for Bradley's future. "Then don't." "It's not that simple," Bradley said. "My entire life is set up around being Bradley Thornton III. Trust fund, family business, social expectations. I don't know how to be anyone else." "You're learning how right now," Maya pointed out. "Every day at Java Junction, every night when you write your blog, every time you choose empathy over entitlement, you're already someone else." Bradley looked at her with something that might be gratitude. "Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing that I could change before I saw it myself. For giving me a chance to become better instead of just destroying me." Maya felt a complicated mix of pride, satisfaction, and something that might have been forgiveness. "We'll see what kind of person you choose to be when this is over." "We will. But Maya, whatever happens, I'll never forget what you taught me." As Maya walked away from the table, she realized that Bradley's transformation had taught her something too. That power used wisely could create positive change. That standing up for yourself could benefit more than just yourself. And that sometimes the most profound victories came not from destroying your enemies, but from helping them become better people.
6 months to the day after the Starbucks incident, Maya stood outside Java Junction on the Lower East Side, watching through the window as Bradley Thornton III completed his final shift. The transformation was remarkable to witness. The arrogant rich boy who had once dismissed service workers as invisible had become someone who moved through the kitchen with practiced efficiency, who joked easily with his coworkers, who treated every customer with genuine respect. Maya had come to see his last day not as a victor checking on her vanquished enemy, but as someone who had invested in another person's growth and wanted to see the results. Bradley emerged from the restaurant at 6 p.m., still wearing his Java Junction polo and carrying a small box of personal items. When he saw Maya waiting on the sidewalk, he stopped, a complex expression crossing his face. "Maya," he said, and she could hear both surprise and something like relief in his voice. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I wanted to see how it ended. How are you feeling?" Bradley set down his box and looked back at the restaurant. "Grateful, actually, which is weird, considering this whole thing started as a punishment." "Grateful for what?" "For Maria, for my coworkers, for learning what real work feels like, for understanding what I'd been missing my entire life." Bradley paused, seeming to search for the right words. "For you, honestly, for caring enough to try to change me instead of just destroying me." Maya felt an unexpected warmth at his words. Over the past 6 months, she'd watched Bradley's blog entries evolve from resentful complaints to genuine insights about class, privilege, and human dignity. The change seemed authentic, but she'd reserved judgment until she could see him in person. "What happens now?" Maya asked. Bradley picked up his box again, shifting it against his hip. "I don't know. That's the honest answer. My father wants me to do an internship at Thornton Properties this summer, but I'm not sure I'm ready for that world again. I'm not sure I want to be." "What do you want?" "I want to finish school. I want to keep working. Maybe not in food service forever, but I want to work, to earn things instead of just inheriting them. I want to use whatever privilege I do have to help people instead of hurting them." Maya studied his face, looking for signs of performance or manipulation. But Bradley's exhaustion was genuine, as was the quiet confidence that hadn't been there 6 months ago. "There's something I need to tell you about what happened that day in Starbucks." Maya felt her stomach tighten slightly. "What about it?" "You weren't my first victim," Bradley said quietly. "You were right about the pattern of behavior your mother mentioned. Phillips Academy, Columbia, other places. I'd been using my privilege to hurt people for years, and I'd gotten away with it because my family's money made problems disappear." Maya had suspected as much, but hearing him admit it still stung. "But you were my last victim. Not because I got caught, but because you showed me who I really was. You held up a mirror and made me see the person I'd become." "And who are you now?" Bradley was quiet for a long moment, watching evening commuters hurry past them. "I'm someone who understands that every person has value, regardless of their bank account or job title. I'm someone who knows that real strength comes from lifting others up, not tearing them down. I'm someone who's earned his calluses and his perspective." As if summoned by their conversation, Maria Santos emerged from Java Junction, having finished her own shift. When she saw Bradley and Maya, she approached with a warm smile. "Maria," Maya said, extending her hand, "Bradley has told us so much about you. Thank you for coming to see his last day." "How did he do?" Maya asked, genuinely curious about Maria's assessment. Maria glanced at Bradley with the kind of fond exasperation typically reserved for difficult but ultimately successful students. "He was terrible for the first month," she said, making Bradley laugh. "Absolutely terrible. Slow, clumsy, complained constantly." "Thanks, Maria," Bradley said with mock indignation. "But," Maria continued, her expression becoming more serious, "he learned. More importantly, he listened. By month 3, he was one of my most reliable employees. By month 6, he was training new hires. The customers love him, the staff respects him, and he's earned every bit of progress he's made." Maya felt a surge of pride that surprised her with its intensity. Bradley had done more than just complete his punishment. He had excelled at it. "What's next for you?" Maya asked.
My business loan was approved last week. I'm opening my own place in 6 months. A small cafe in my neighborhood, focusing on authentic Latin American food and supporting local artists. That's incredible, Maya said. Congratulations. Bradley's been helping me with the business plan, Maria continued. Turns out all that expensive education is good for something. He's been reviewing my financial projections, helping me understand licensing requirements, connecting me with resources. Maya looked at Bradley with new respect. You're using your privilege constructively. Trying to, Bradley replied. Maria's dream deserves to succeed, and I can help make that happen. It feels good to use my advantages to lift someone else up, instead of putting people down.
The three of them stood together on the sidewalk as evening settled over the city. Maya realized that this moment, the former victim, the reformed bully, and the wise supervisor who had guided his transformation, represented something hopeful about human nature and the possibility of change. I should go, Maya said finally. I have studying to do. Maya, Bradley said as she turned to leave, thank you. For everything. For seeing potential in me that I didn't see in myself. Maya smiled. Don't thank me yet. Thank me in 5 years, when you've proven that the person you've become is permanent. I will, Bradley promised. Count on it. As Maya walked away, she pulled out her phone and opened Bradley's blog for what would likely be the last time. His final entry had been posted that morning, and she read it as she made her way back to campus. Today marks the end of my 6-month journey from entitled rich boy to functional human being. I want to thank Maya Chen for giving me the opportunity to change instead of simply destroying me. I want to thank Maria Santos for teaching me about real leadership and dignity. I want to thank my co-workers for accepting me despite knowing exactly why I was there. But mostly, I want to thank everyone who's been following this blog for holding me accountable, knowing that people were watching, judging, hoping for my growth, and sometimes rooting for my failure, kept me honest in ways I never expected. 6 months ago, I thought power meant having enough money to make problems disappear. Now I understand that real power means having the strength to face your problems, learn from them, and use that knowledge to become better. Real power means lifting others up instead of tearing them down. This blog will remain online permanently, not as a monument to my shame, but as a reminder that change is possible if you're willing to do the work. To anyone out there who recognizes themselves in the person I used to be, it's not too late. You can choose to be better. You just have to be willing to earn it. Tomorrow, I start a new chapter. I'm transferring to a state school where I'll pay my own tuition through work-study programs and student loans. I'm majoring in social work instead of economics, and I'm committed to spending my life making amends for the person I used to be by helping others become the people they're meant to be. Maya Chen, if you're reading this, thank you for believing that people can change. Thank you for showing me that real strength isn't about making others feel small, but about making them feel valued. You saved my life by refusing to let me continue living as someone I'm ashamed of. This is Bradley Thornton III, signing off, not because my punishment is over, but because my education is just beginning. Maya closed her phone, feeling a complex mix of emotions, pride, certainly, and satisfaction, but also something deeper, hope. Hope that change was possible, that people could grow, that standing up for yourself could create ripples of positive transformation that extended far beyond the original confrontation. 3 days later, Maya was surprised to receive a call from her mother asking her to come to the Chen Global offices. When she arrived at the 52nd floor executive suite, she found Catherine waiting with a small package and an unusual expression. "What's this about?" Maya asked, settling into the chair across from her massive desk. Catherine slid the package across the polished surface. "Open it."
Inside, Maya found a scholarship certificate, a full-ride academic scholarship to any university of her choice, funded by an anonymous donor. Her hands trembled as she read the details. "Mom, this is incredible, but I already have my scholarship to Metro." "Read the donor information more carefully," Catherine interrupted with a slight smile.
Maya looked again and gasped. The scholarship had been funded by the Thornton Family Foundation, with a specific note that it was established to support students who demonstrate exceptional character in the face of adversity. "Bradley did this?" Maya asked in amazement. "Actually, his father did," Catherine replied. "It seems young Mr. Thornton had a very interesting conversation with his family about his experiences over the past 6 months. Bradley Jr. was so impressed by what his son had learned and so ashamed of the behavior that led to that learning that he wanted to make amends." Maya stared at the scholarship certificate, feeling overwhelmed. "This is worth over $200,000. "Indeed. And it comes with a guaranteed internship position at Thornton Properties, focusing on their new community development initiatives. Apparently, they're shifting their business model to include affordable housing and community investment projects." "Because of Bradley's experience?" Catherine nodded. "Change has a way of rippling outward, sweetheart. You stood up to one entitled young man in a coffee shop, and it's already affecting how an entire family thinks about their wealth and responsibility." Maya felt tears welling up in her eyes. The scared scholarship student who had counted out change for coffee 6 months ago could never have imagined this outcome. "There's more," Catherine continued, her expression becoming even more pleased. "I've been following the online response to Bradley's blog. It's been shared over 2 million times, translated into dozens of languages, and has inspired similar accountability programs at universities across the country." "What kind of programs?" "Privilege education initiatives, programs where students from wealthy backgrounds work service jobs and document their experiences. Harvard, Yale, Stanford, they're all implementing variations of what you created." Maya sat back in her chair, overwhelmed by the scope of what had grown from a single moment of standing up for herself. "You did this," Catherine said softly. "You turned a moment of victimization into a catalyst for widespread change. You proved that sometimes the most powerful response to cruelty isn't revenge, it's transformation." 6 months later, Maya was walking across the Columbia University campus. She'd transferred using the Thornton Scholarship when she saw a familiar figure setting up a table for what appeared to be some kind of event. Bradley looked up and waved, and Maya approached to see what he was doing. "Privilege education workshops," Bradley explained, gesturing to the sign behind his table. "We're partnering with dining services, maintenance, and student services to create opportunities for students to work alongside the people who keep this university running." "How's the response been?" "Better than expected. We have a waiting list 300 students long. Turns out, a lot of people are ready to examine their privilege and do something constructive with it." Maya looked at the enthusiasm on Bradley's face, the genuine passion in his voice, and marveled at the transformation. The person who had once used his privilege as a weapon was now dedicating his life to helping others understand and responsibly wield their own. "Maya," his voice becoming more serious, "I know I've said this before, but I need to say it again. Thank you. Not just for changing my life, but for showing me that I could change it myself." Maya smiled, remembering the terrified young woman who had stood in a Starbucks 6 months ago, counting change and trying to make herself invisible.
That woman couldn't have imagined becoming someone who inspired international change, who turned a moment of assault into a movement for accountability. Thank you for proving that people can change, for showing that privilege can be a tool for justice instead of a weapon for oppression. As Maya walked away, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She'd learned that power wasn't about money or connections. It was about the courage to stand up for what was right, the wisdom to choose transformation over destruction, and the strength to believe that people could become better than they were. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Proud of you always." Maya typed back, "Proud of us both." The girl who had been slapped in a Starbucks had become a woman who changed the world one person at a time. And that, Maya realized, was the most powerful transformation of all.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.